What's going on, everybody? It's Clint with the Die Hard MMA podcast, and this is the total takedown for UFC 270. We are going over this big, stacked, awesome card, top to bottom. We're going to talk totals, that's right, not picking sides. We're talking about how long these fights are going to last, whether or not they will finish under 1.5, or if they're going to sail over that 2.5 and go straight onto a judge's decision, give you maybe a different look, a different angle to put some change in your pocket for this big event coming up on Saturday. Do me a favor, like the video and subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio. Let's dig straight on in. First fight of the night, Kay Hansen taking on Jasmine Judavicius. What we have is Jasudavicius. I have no idea how to say that last name right. What we have here is a total set at 2.5, classic women's MMA. We are looking over 2.5, minus 170. Under 2.5 can be had from about plus 225 to plus 230, it looks like. This is one of those interesting spots to me where we've seen both these women totally capable of grappling. We've seen Jasmine have a nasty, dirty top game, but Kay Hansen's been exceptionally tough and durable throughout her run so far from what we've seen. Jasmine has a little bit of a gas tank issue. If she can't control the pace, she slows down. Kay Hansen's got some decent pop on her punches. This is one of those women's sloppy fights where I could see maybe taking advantage of the massively high totals. They're expecting this one to hit the judges' scorecards. I might want to duck and weave and maybe take an under here in this spot. Now, I am leaning more towards Kay Hansen being the one finishing of the two if anybody's going to put this thing away. So maybe if you're going to do that, just pick your fighter, take her inside the distance. But I actually do think there's some decent possibility that this fight finishes. No bet for me on this one, but maybe leaning a little bit to the under. Next fight up, lightweight, we've got Matt Frevola taking on Gianno Valdez. And Valdez is making his UFC debut. The Steamroller is a guy who we know to be a little bit chinny, but has gas for days. Total set at 2.5. The over is plus 110. The under is minus 130. And this one seems like it's a little bit binary to me, doesn't it? You go over 2.5 and you're thinking that's because Matt Frevola chain wrestles a la Merab Dvalishvili, one of his training partners, gets this thing going, keeps it on the mat, floors this guy, gets it over. He has that submission opportunity. He is a Matt Jiu-Jitsu trained fighter, so there's a chance that he can maybe sink in some kind of a submission here. But coming off of a bad KO loss, you'd kind of expect him to keep the risk to a minimum if he can. Gianno Valdez, on the other hand, he's also a strong wrestler. He's also got a decent gas tank. This guy goes for broke on the feet, though. He hits hard, so if you're looking for Valdez, you're probably thinking under. So under does encapsulate both guys a little bit. Valdez taking a big step up in competition, so maybe both guys have upside for finishing. I guess I would look at the minus 130 here, but it wouldn't shock me if we ended up with a wrestling match and this thing ended up being a grindy over that hit. So again, probably no bet for me, but slight lean to the under. Next up, we got a women's strawweight fight. Silvana Gomez Juarez taking on Vanessa Demopoulos. And they moved this one on me. Let me get my totals up here. Looks like we got a total set at 2.5. Over is minus 190. Under is plus 165. Once again, we've got a little bit of a recipe for violence. Striker versus grappler. So if they're on the feet, Silvana's going to have the advantage. She hits hard. She's nasty. She looks for the finish. If it goes to the mat, Vanessa Demopoulos is absolutely going to have the submission advantage. I think she can get her out of there with a tap. But she doesn't really have the wrestling to get this thing into her realm. So she's going to have to rely on the body lock, clinch, takedowns, trips, things like that. And if those aren't successful, she's going to be standing with Silvana, and one of these women absolutely could topple over. I think there, again, is maybe a little bit of value on the plus 165 under simply because of how green these two women are. There is a chance for the TKO. There's a chance for the submission, but I'm not overly confident in that. I've got a feeling these two just kind of beat each other pillar to post and it ends up going all 3 rounds. So even though I think there's a little bit of value maybe on that number, I'm going to say this one goes over 2.5. I don't have a strong feeling on that one here. Bantamweight fight, Tony Gravely taking on Simon Oliveira. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Total here is set at 2.5. The over is minus 125. The under is plus 105, and I really like this under 2.5. I haven't bet it yet, but this one might actually make my official card. Under 2.5 at plus 105 seems legit here. Tony Gravely in his last fight, he had Nate Maness dead to rights in that first round. You give him just 5 more seconds, and Nate Maness doesn't get up from that. He gets the first round TKO. Tony Gravely Gravely also a little bit known for mismanaging his gas tank. He can slow down, he can gas out, leaves his opponents with the opportunity to finish. Simon Oliveira is a slick Muay Thai striker. He's got big, powerful kicks on him, spinning throws, which, you know, if those land, they can take anybody out of there. And of course, he's got that squeeze. With Tony Gravely being a wrestler, he's going to be shooting in on double legs, and if he messes up, if he leaves his neck out there, Oliveira will snatch up some kind of a guillotine. There are tons of opportunities for violence on both sides of this fight. Another one where, similar to the Matt Frevola fight, Tony Gravely coming off a bad knockout, you would kind of expect him to be wrestle first, but we can't count out a submission or ground and pound from Tony Gravely even if he does go that route. So I definitely think there's upside for finishing here. I'd be looking under 2.5 at a nice little plus price. Kicking off the main preliminary card here, we've got Jack Della Maddalena taking on Pete Rodriguez, the UFC newcomer. And this is another one that might just make my card. Total at this point is 1.5. Over is plus 120. Under is minus 140. And this one kind of speaks for itself. Pete Rodriguez is 4-0 as a professional, so he's got a very low-level amount of experience to be making his UFC debut, but he has yet to hit the 2-minute mark as a professional. In his amateur career, he did hit the second round, but he still went under the 2.5 mark, or he probably still went under the 1.5 mark. Sorry about that. He's been to the second round, but not past the 2-minute mark of the second round, even in his amateur days. So he is a round one knockout machine. Jack is a guy that puts his foot on the gas pedal and he just freaking keeps it there. That's kind of my worry about him, is that he leads with his face. He is more than willing to take whatever you have got to try to return fire and work his own game plan. If he comes in here a little bit more technical, he probably just blows straight on through Pete. And if Pete doesn't get Jack out of there in that first round, you got to wonder how this thing is going to look after that point. The 1.5s make me a little bit nervous. They've got to end, and they've got to end in a hurry. The fact that Pete is a guy that we haven't really seen beaten, especially at the pro level, I know this is a massive step up for him, but he's seemingly got the kind of power that can change the tide on anybody. If he is tough, if he is gritty, if he's durable, and he carries that power late, I mean, this thing could end up in the third round deep, and we could all be sweating. So I don't think I want to bet this one, but I can totally see the argument for the under 1.5 at minus 140, considering the guy's never been out of round one as a professional, and he's taking this massive step up that if he doesn't get that finish early, he probably ends up being the one getting finished. So I get it. I'll say under 1.5, but again, a little bit too sketchy for me to put my money on. Welterweight fight up next. Michael Morales, another Dana White's Contender Series fighter, taking on Trevin Giles. Total set at 2.5. Over is minus 175. Under is plus 155. We've got Miles Morales, who's been kind of a knockout artist. Again, low level of competition, stepping up against a UFC caliber opponent, somebody who's got a ton of experience here at the UFC level, in Trevin Giles, making his debut at 170. So we've got a couple of interesting factors here. Trevin Giles dropping to a new weight class. We know that can always mess with people. That can weaken the chin. That can take the water out of your head. So if he has a tough cut, looking under would definitely be the way to go here. We've got a Dana White Contender Series fighter who's a bit of a killer be killed style fighter. He just has yet to actually be the one getting killed. He's 12-0 undefeated. So he's definitely got the finishing upside. There could absolutely be a finish here, but what we've seen in the UFC so far from Trevin Giles is anytime he monitors his gas tank well enough, he just boxes people up for 15 minutes. He likes to coast. He likes to stretch these things out and win minutes. So because of that, I am in the Trevin Giles camp. I will fully admit that. I'm going to say that the over is probably the way to go here. Again, a little bit dependent on those weigh-ins. Make sure you check in tomorrow for the Friday Undefeated post weigh-in show, because we will be looking very closely at one Trevin Giles, because with that debut at 170, if he comes in on the scale looking awful, that flips this whole story right on its head. So we'll see what he looks like, but tentatively I'm going to say over for this one. Bantamweight taking Ronnie Barcelos versus Victor Henry here. Victor Henry, a guy that's got a little bit of a cult following from outside the UFC, making his debut late in life against Ronnie Barcelos. Well-rounded gatekeeper style that's a little over the hill himself. Total set at 2.5, sorry. Total set at 2.5, and it looks like we have got plus 105 or even money to the over 2.5, with the under being minus 140-ish, minus 135. I do see one book out there that's hanging these at a pick'em, it looks like. So some juice slightly coming in on that under 2.5, looking for violence, and I get it. You know, Hani Barcelos is the kind of fighter that I mentioned, well-rounded. He can do it all. He hits hard. He's got good striking, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And if you are not up to stuff, he will exit you from that fight as quickly as humanly possible. And Victor Henry is the type of guy making his UFC debut late in life that, yeah, he's 21-5, but he's never fought anybody the caliber of Hani Barcelos. I don't expect him to... I mean, it's going to be one of those things where, honestly, I'm a little afraid to put my money on this fight because Victor Henry does look like he's tough. He does look like he's got some stuff going on. I don't think he can handle Hani Barcelos, but I hate how wide this line is. If Hani does what Hani does, I think Victor's going to get finished, and it's probably going to happen early. So I'd be leaning to the under 2.5. Now, if Victor Henry pulls the upset, do we really think he finishes Hani Barcelos? I don't know about that. I think if Victor Henry's probably going to end up getting the win, it probably is a decision, and he skates over. But I have a hard time seeing him beating Hani for 15 minutes, you know, the course of a full fight, winning that much time. So I'm going to say under. I'm going to go with the under, but this is definitely a sketchy fight. One that I don't have a good feel for because Victor Henry is a guy I'm not very familiar with. Featherweight fight up here, Ilia Topuria taking on Charles Air Jourdain, and this is one heck of a fight. Props to Jourdain for stepping up here on short notice against an absolute monster like Ilia. Total set at 2.5. Over is plus 145. Under is minus 165. And yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that under. It looks like the actually I'm quoting that 2.5, but most books have this hung at 1.5. So let me go ahead and reanalyze this here for you. The 1.5 is set at about minus 130. Under 1.5 is plus 100 even money. So it is juiced to the over. It looks like they're expecting this thing to finish between rounds 2 and 3 based on these lines. And I can kind of understand that. I think Charles Jourdain is tough enough to hang in here. I'll say that much. I think if Ilia Topuria decides he wants to get into a pissing contest with Charles Jourdain and stand with him, he could maybe live to regret that decision because Jourdain has got some slick stand-up on him. The problem with Jourdain is that he doesn't do so well in the grappling. He's a slick jiu-jitsu player, but he doesn't have much in the way of takedown defense. Ilia Topuria is a monster wrestler. He's very skilled. He's got a great gas tank. He is relentless. So I kind of expect Ilia Topuria to ground Charles Jourdain and just work him over the course of this fight. Now, if he does end up getting some kind of a sub, that's definitely possible. It's definitely on the table. The only way Charles Jourdain has lost inside the distance was by submission, but that was deep in the 3rd round after he had been worn out. I don't know that that sub is going to come super early, super quickly against a guy like Ilia Topuria. I'd be leaning to the over 1.5 here. I think Charles Jourdain can get this thing into the 2nd round, maybe even into the 3rd round, or survive to see a decision on the judges' scorecards. I think Ilia Topuria pretty much dominates this fight, but I don't know that he finishes it super early that way. We have reached the main pay-per-view card for the evening. Rodolfo Vieira taking on Wellington Turman. The people's main event, apparently, if you look online with the way the opinions are getting flown around left and right on this particular fight. Total here appears to be set at 1.5. Over is juiced minus 150. Under is plus 130. And I guess I'm going to have to say violence here, folks. We've got a spot where Rodolfo Vieira is basically taking on the company brand version of himself. You know, you've got Fruit Loops and Captain Crunch, and then right next to it, you've got the Kellogg's brand, whatever it is, Crunchies, so, you know, some knockoff name. Your mom tells you it tastes the same, but it doesn't. Yeah, that's Wellington Turman here. He's got the same skill set as Rodolfo Vieira, just not quite as solid. He's got less of a chin of Rodolfo Vieira. The one thing that I see people hanging on out there is the gas tank of Rodolfo Vieira, and counting on that thing to fail him basically here in this spot. But what I'm kind of getting at is that Wellington Turman is not some monster striker, all right? The way he wins his fights is grappling. So if he's going to force someone like the black belt hunter, BJJ world champion, Rodolfo Vieira to grapple, that's the one place he's not going to gas out. That's the one place where he's going to feel comfortable doing the work that he needs to do. So if we get into a grappling contest between these two, I think the black belt hunter does exactly what his name suggests, and he takes Wellington Wellington Turman out of there. On top of that, we saw K1 Rodolfo Vieira in his last fight. Those big striking improvements, rocking a much more durable man in Dustin Stolfus with just a jab. I don't think Wellington Turman can take those bombs. And then I will flip my argument on his head. If you couldn't tell, I am in the Rodolfo Vieira camp. But if everybody else is right, if there is a weakness to Rodolfo's game, it's going to be the gas tank. It's going to be getting him to expend his energy early and then taking advantage of that once the second round rolls around. So yeah, I think violence all day here in this spot. I think the under 1.5 at a plus price is a sneaky, nasty way to go ahead and get some value in this spot. And if you've got access to the alternate totals and you can get under 2.5 at minus 145, I think that is a sneaky way to take this fight, because I've got a hard time seeing Turman surviving on the ground with Rodolfo Vieira. I've got a hard time seeing Wellington Turman's chin holding up in an extended striking match, and I have a hard time seeing Vieira's gas tank holding up in an extended anything match. I mean, I guess except for, like I mentioned before, the grappling. But if this thing turns into a dogfight, that's maybe when he will fail. But again, I think Turman's chin will fail before Rodolfo's gas tank does. Either way, I think it's going under. Let's say violence. Bantamweight fight, Cody Stamann taking on Saeed Nurmagomedov. And I talked about this on my show. You hear that last name, Nurmagomedov. He's a striker. He's not a grappler. He's not a Khabib. So this guy's going to be looking to use footwork, use his reach, use his range. And he's taking on Cody Stamann, a tough and durable, gritty wrestler type of fighter. Total set at 2.5. The over is minus 300. The under is plus 250, and I can't go anywhere but the over here, right? Like, I would love to say that I think somebody's getting finished, but Saeed knows how to grapple enough that he'll stay safe. Cody Stamann is not a guy that finishes anybody, whether it be submission or ground and pound. He is not going to be getting anybody out of the octagon. He only wins by decision. Saeed Nurmagomedov winning by knockout? Maybe. Spinning back fist, spinning heel kick, catching Cody Stamann with a knee on his way in, something like that. It's MMA. Anything could happen. But I think more often than not, we see the judges' scorecards on this one for a nasty, hairy split decision. Welterweight fight, Michel Pereira taking on André Fialho. And this is going to be a fun fight. André coming out of the woodwork, making his UFC debut. Michel Pereira, the guy who does all the crazy backflips and, Superman punches off the cage and crazy shit like that. This will be fun. Total on this one set at 2.5. The over is plus 120. The under is minus 140. And I think the under makes all the sense in the world here in this spot. Michel Pereira gasses out. I know he's gone to decision the last couple of fights, but he slows down massively in that third round. He's taken on an opponent who is new to the UFC, so we're not entirely certain that this guy is UFC caliber. He could get booted in round one with a KO. And the type of power that André Fialho brings to the table, he could be the one to upset Michel Pereira, who basically sticks his head out there to be hit and relies on that athleticism to get out of the way or survive the shots. I think one of these guys is going to end their night violently. I do think the under 2.5 at minus 140 would be the way to go. Co-main event, Brandon Moreno taking on Deiveson Figueiredo for the third time. Total set at 3.5, it looks like. And this is one that I actually did bet. I got the over 3.5 at minus 120. It looks like it's still sitting right around that spot. Minus 120, minus 122 look to be the numbers that are out there. So you can get minus 105 or plus 102, it looks like, on the under 3.5. And I know a lot of people are going to call for violence, but I'm banking on the durability of Brandon Moreno. I'm banking on Fight Ready having the conditioning up for Deiveson Figueiredo, because that first fight, they went all 25 minutes and neither guy really showed any signs of slowing in that fight. That was a hell of a matchup. I think we see a similar fight to that this time around. Deiveson Figueiredo having the tough weight cut that he did in the rematch was really the tail of the tape. Now, I love Brandon Moreno. I don't want to take anything away from my guy Brandon Moreno in that fight. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, but Figueiredo's never really looked that fragile before. And with him going out to Fight Ready, training with a guy like Cejudo, having the body change we've seen from him and from Fight Ready like we always do with those fighters, you expect his weight cut to be on point. You expect his cardio to be on point. You expect him to rehydrate the right way. I fully expect Deiveson Figueiredo to have more gas in the tank this time around. That being the case, he should be able to survive in there longer against Brandon Moreno. I think we see an absolute war, and this thing goes all 5 rounds. I will take the over 3.5 here, and I think that is a fair price to do so. Main event time, Francis Ngannou taking on Ciryl Gane. What we have is a total set at 2.5. The over looks to be, this is about a pick'em, slight juice to the under, The market's a little bit confused on this one. I see -115s and -125s on the under 2.5, and I think that makes sense. You know, Francis Ngannou is the guy with that death touch. He's the lone sole human possessor of that kind of insane level of power. I think he can put out literally anybody. We've never seen Ciryl Gane lose, so we don't know what that looks like, but no man alive or elephant for that matter can stand up to a punch from Francis Ngannou. So if someone's going to do it, it's going to be a guy like Francis, and it's probably going to be early. Now, if Ciryl Gane does what Ciryl Gane does, which is, you know, avoid the fight, stay at range, attack the legs, snap the jab out there, attack the body. You know, if he does all that kind of stuff, I'll be honest, I don't know that I have faith in Francis Ngannou's gas tank to hold up for more than 3 rounds. So because we've got the total set at 2.5, it could get very, very sketchy in that 3rd round because you'd only have the first 2 minutes and 30 seconds to hit this. But I do think Ciryl Gane probably wants to make a statement in this fight as much as Francis Ngannou does. That if Ciryl Gane has control of this fight, if Ciryl Gane is the one in the driver's seat, he probably wears Francis Ngannou out after those first 2 rounds and then puts him away there at the end of round 2 or the beginning of round 3. So I think the total set at 2.5 is pretty perfect, and I have a bit of a hard time seeing how we get over that unless we have a Black Beast versus Francis Ngannou style first round where literally nobody moves, and that's entirely on the table, by the way, with the power that Francis has. If they don't touch each other in that first round, that's really going to extend this fight quite a bit, and that's how I see it, you know, maybe getting to the 3rd or the 4th round before a finish. But if they come out at all aggressively, this thing could get over in a hurry. So I'd be looking at violence under 2.5. No official bet on that one for me. That's the total takedown, folks. Got a couple of spots for you where I've personally put my money on. Got a few that I think I might put my money on by the end of the week. As always, follow me at DieHardMMAPod on Twitter for my official picks. I do tweet those out as I make them. And make sure you subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio. Good luck on all your degenerate action. I will see you tomorrow for the Undefeated Post Weigh-In Show. Let's roll.